The Church Growth and Giving Show, your resource for growing faithful communities. Brought to you by Vanco, helping tens of thousands of churches thrive for over 20 years. Join Jordan and Andy as they share insights drawn from decades of church giving and engagement expertise.
Today, we're talking about church board meetings, which can sometimes feel like, unfortunately, a bit of a chore, but they don't have to be. We're going to explore how to transform these meetings from meh to meaningful. Let's start with the key elements that make a church board meeting effective.
It starts with having clear objectives. Have you ever walked out of a board meeting wondering if you actually accomplished anything? The secret isn't just prayer, though that certainly helps. It's having clear, measurable objectives for each meeting.
Can you give an example of what you mean by that?
Sure, instead of a vague agenda item like discuss the budget, you might say finalize and approve the budget for next quarter's outreach program. When you share these specific objectives ahead of time, it keeps everyone focused and prevents those endless side discussions.
I think sometimes meetings drag on because people aren't sure exactly what decision needs to be made.
When everyone knows the goal, decisions happen faster. Setting smart goals for your meetings, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, can make a world of difference.
You mentioned prayer. It's central to church leadership, so how should it be incorporated into board meetings?
Prayer isn't just a routine formality to open and close meetings. It sets the tone and reminds everyone why they're gathered in the first place. When you begin and end with prayer, you invite God's wisdom into every discussion, from major budget decisions to the menu at the annual picnic.
I love that perspective, that prayer isn't just a bookend, but really central to the meeting itself.
Right. Bringing in scripture or devotional readings keeps conversations anchored in faith. When tackling tough topics like updating bylaws or navigating conflicts, it helps to ask, are we seeking God's will or just trying to win an argument? A simple prayer can shift perspectives and keep the focus on unity rather than personal preferences.
Let's talk about technology. How can churches use tech tools to enhance their meetings?
Technology can be a game changer. Virtual platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams allow boards to meet efficiently even when members can't be in the same room. Tools like Google Workspace or Trello help keep tasks organized without endless email chains.
I've seen some churches really struggle with technology, though. Any tips for making that process smoother?
The key is to use technology to enhance communication, not complicate it. Imagine your church planning team collaborating on a shared Google Doc. Everyone can add input, adjust the agenda, and make real-time updates without passing around 30 versions of the same file. But keep it simple. The right tools should simplify discussions, not add more confusion.
Productivity is something everyone wants more of in meetings. How can church boards ensure their time is well spent?
Few things test patience like a meeting that drags on with no end in sight. To avoid the dreaded meeting that could have been an email, set strict time limits for each agenda item. An agenda isn't just a suggestion, it's your best defense against endless tangents.
There are so many horror stories where teams spend 45 minutes of a meeting on a 5-minute item and then rush through important decisions at the end because they run out of time.
That's all too common. Assigning a facilitator to keep discussions moving and gently redirect off-topic debates can make a huge difference. Some churches even use a timer, cutting off discussions at 15 minutes per topic. The real question is, if your meeting lasted half as long, would you get just as much done?
That's a great question to reflect on. What would you say are the key elements of a truly successful board meeting?
The best meetings prioritize participation, timely decision-making, and follow-through. Was anything accomplished if board members walked away without knowing their next steps? A good rule of thumb. By the end, every action item should have a name and a deadline attached. Otherwise, you'll be discussing the same topics next month.
How can churches measure if their board meetings are actually effective?
Well, if no one dreads the next meeting, you're on the right track. But more seriously, post-meeting surveys can reveal whether people feel their time was well spent. A simple checklist can help you track whether decisions led to action. If you find that half your agenda items keep getting postponed, ask yourself, are you holding meetings to make decisions or to talk about making decisions?
Let's talk about creating an engaging agenda. That seems to be the foundation of a good meeting.
An effective agenda balances routine updates with strategic discussions. Too often, boards spend 90% of their time on reports about what happened in the past and only 10% planning for the future.
So, how would you suggest structuring an agenda to avoid that trap?
Keep routine updates like financials or committee reports short. Think 10 to 15 minutes, and then dive into the real meaty stuff, like strategic planning. You might allocate 20 minutes for the usual updates, then give 40 minutes to discuss church growth strategies. That way, you're informed, but your time is spent thinking about the future, not just reviewing the past.
I've heard some churches include something called a vision casting segment in their meetings. What's that about?
Vision casting is a powerful way to keep everyone's eyes on the prize, whether that's expanding outreach programs or growing your congregation. This part of the meeting ensures that the board stays motivated, aligned, and focused on the big picture.
That sounds really valuable.
It is. When the pastor shares a vision for the youth ministry or prayer team, it's not just talk. It inspires the team and gets everyone moving toward the goal. Plus, it's a great way to keep the momentum going without sounding like a broken record.
How important is it to follow up on action items from previous meetings?
Crucial! When you kick off your next board meeting, revisit those action items from the last one. This way, you're not just running in circles, but making progress. Take volunteer recruitment, for example. If you set some goals last time, check in to see if any new volunteers have signed up or if you need to shift your strategy.
What essential items should be included in a church board meeting agenda?
You can't go wrong with the basics: opening prayer, financial reports, committee updates, new business, and closing prayer. But here's a question to consider. Are you spending enough time on the key items, or do you sometimes get lost in the weeds of less critical stuff?
That's a great point. How can boards prioritize agenda items for maximum efficiency?
Think of your agenda like a to-do list. Tackle the most urgent and important items first. You probably don't want to put off discussing infrastructure if your church roof leaks. It's all about focusing on what matters most, rather than getting distracted by the nice to have tasks.
What about distributing the agenda? I've been in meetings where people are seeing the agenda for the first time as the meeting starts.
That's a recipe for an unproductive meeting. Aim to send out the agenda 3 to 5 days ahead through email or a shared platform so board members have enough time to prepare. A shared Google Drive folder is a great option. It keeps everything in one place and prevents that dreaded "what's on the agenda again" moment.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the responsibilities of church board members. What would you say are their essential duties?
Board members need to balance their spiritual and administrative roles. It's like walking a tightrope. You've got to be spiritually present for the congregation, but also practical regarding finances, programs, and strategic planning.
That sounds challenging.
It can be. A good board member knows when to pray for wisdom and when to crunch the numbers. Both aspects are important. You're serving both God and the church community through your leadership.
What about ethical responsibilities? Those seem particularly important in a church context.
Ethics in church leadership are non negotiable. Board members must act with integrity, maintain confidentiality, and keep personal interests in check, whether it's ensuring transparency or recusing yourself from voting on issues where you have a conflict of interest. Your ethical duties go hand in hand with your leadership.
How can board members effectively support the pastor and church staff?
Supporting your pastor and staff isn't just about approving budgets, though those checks don't write themselves. It's about being their biggest cheerleader, whether you're approving funds for pastoral training or just showing up with coffee and a kind word after a marathon weekend of services.
It sounds like emotional support is just as important as administrative support.
You've got that right. Consider it as being part treasurer, part unofficial therapist, and part motivational speaker. Your pastor and staff need to know you have their backs as they carry out the church's mission.
Speaking of mission, how can board members contribute to advancing the church's purpose?
Serving on a church board goes beyond meetings and motions to making a real impact. Every decision you make shapes the church's future, from strategic planning to ensuring finances support meaningful work. The question each member should ask is, am I helping drive the mission forward or just approving budgets?
What are the key roles within a church board? I imagine different members have different responsibilities.
A well structured board is truly a team where every member has a distinct role, but all work harmoniously. The chairperson keeps discussions on track, the secretary documents minutes, and the treasurer ensures financial accountability. Committee leads might tackle areas like worship or outreach. Imagine a board meeting where everyone knows their part. Sounds refreshing, right?
It really does. Let's talk about conducting efficient meetings. What are some best practices for starting and ending on time?
It sounds simple, but it's powerful. Start when you say you will and end when you say you will. If your agenda says 6:30 to 8 p.m., stick to it. After all, no one ever said, I wish that meeting had lasted longer.
That's so true. And what about facilitating discussions? That seems like a real art.
The chairperson's role is crucial. Leading a discussion isn't about talking the most, it's about guiding the conversation. Draw out quieter members with open ended questions, and when the discussion drifts, bring it back to the main point.
Any tips for redirecting conversations that go off track?
If a debate about finances turns into a deep dive into the color of the new carpet, it's time for a gentle redirection. Great thoughts. Let's save that for the committee handling renovations. Being respectful but firm keeps the meeting moving without shutting people down.
What are some signs that a meeting is becoming unproductive?
Watch for people zoning out, tensions rising, or the same topics resurfacing with no resolution. A wandering meeting needs a solid agenda and someone willing to keep things moving. Without actionable conclusions, you will have a lot of words, but no actual progress month after month.
Let's talk about conflict, which is inevitable in any group. How can boards handle disagreements in a healthy way?
Biblical principles provide excellent guidance here. Matthew 18:15-17 isn't just a nice idea, it's a lifeline for keeping church governance from turning into a battlefield. When you address a disagreement privately first, you give the other person dignity.
I've seen what happens when people skip those steps. It rarely ends well.
Right. Imagine a board member skipping these steps and venting in a group email. Nothing fuels division faster than a well timed reply all. Active listening is also crucial. People don't always want agreement, they want to be heard.
Can you explain what active listening looks like in a board meeting?
It's about paraphrasing what someone says before responding. This slows the urge to debate. Picture a treasurer pausing during a heated budget discussion to say, so, you're not against the purchase. You just want more transparency? It's incredible how tension can be diffused with a simple, well placed question.
What about documenting meetings? That seems really important for continuity and accountability.
It's crucial. Meeting minutes should capture the heart of the conversation without editorializing. Think of the secretary as a historian, not a commentator. Instead of writing, everyone was thrilled about the new outreach programs. Phrase it like, the committee discussed and approved the program with enthusiasm.
Are there legal considerations for church board minutes?
Definitely. If a question arises about a governance decision, clear documentation can resolve it. Store minutes securely, restrict access to key staff, and keep digital copies in a password-protected folder. Trust me, in the future, you'll appreciate the foresight.
What information should be included in board meeting minutes?
Every detail matters. Minutes should capture the date, time, attendees, agenda items, decisions, and next steps, not just for record keeping, but for accountability. For example, next meeting, August 15th, 2025, at 6:30 p.m. It should be concise but complete.
As we wrap up, let's zero in on how church board meetings can contribute to growth and success in the broader church context.
When done right, board meetings can foster innovation and new ideas. Setting aside even 15 minutes for fresh thinking, like discussing ways to engage younger members, could turn a routine meeting into a creative powerhouse.
And I imagine board decisions directly impact church outreach and community engagement.
Absolutely. A single board decision, like funding a community food drive, can transform church events into powerful outreach opportunities. Board meetings also help identify and address challenges in church operations. Ignoring problems won't make them disappear, unfortunately.
That's so true. Any final thoughts on making board meetings more meaningful?
Remember that strong church leadership isn't about having more meetings. It's about making the meetings you have count. Proper discussions today shape a thriving, engaged congregation tomorrow. And for listeners who want some practical help, we've created free templates to make your board meetings more effective.
Those sound really helpful. What kind of templates are available?
We have church meeting agenda templates, minutes templates, sign in sheets, an effectiveness checklist, and a board member portfolio template to define roles and responsibilities. They're all available for free download through the link in our show notes. We even included a church leadership guide to help your church achieve its missions.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us on the Church Growth and Giving Show. Please like and subscribe to our channel for the latest updates. It also helps support us in creating free materials and content to help you and other churches in your mission.